This is Truth Be Told.
That not only are there reptilians here,
new evidence of UFO fleets.
We were close to nuclear war.
To help you transform so that you can live your highest truth.
We're not being told just because we're not ready for it.
Radio stations of frequency, vibrational.
I was a homicide detective with LAPD.
UFOs increase. Visitations. Fire underground. Welcome to another riveting episode of Truth Be Told Paranormal. Today we have a truth-compelling story to share with you. Joining us is the esteemed author and journalist David DeKok, and he has dedicated years to uncovering the hauntings and tragic tale of Centralia, Pennsylvania, a town forever scarred by relentless underground inferno. His book, Fire Underground, The Ongoing Tragedy of Centralia Mine Fire, delves deep into the history, the impact, and the enduring legacy of a disaster that has burned beneath the town since 1962. Through meticulous research and gripping narratives, David brings the light of the human and environmental toll of this devastating event. I'm Tony Sweet with Truth Be Told. Join us as we explore the eerie realities of Centralia, the resilience of its residents, and the broader implications of the subterranean blaze. Let's dive into the haunting world of Centralia with David DeKok. Hello, David.
Hello.
Well, first of all, I have to say, for the people tuning in today, David is a great writer. He was a journalist, and he says he's semi-retired. I don't believe that because he's still, using his talents to write these books. He definitely is going to have to come back another time because he has a book called Murder in the Stack. So we're going to have you back for another time. But today we're here to talk about the book that you wrote, Fire Underground. And for the people that don't know, I didn't even know about this. For the people that don't know what this fire is, it's like, okay, it's a fire. Tell us a little bit more before we really dive into the subject of Centralia.
Well, Centralia was always a coal mining town. That was its only purpose for being from about the 1850s on, and they mined coal for 100 years there. And in 1962, because of a series of accidents, the fire spread from the town landfill into the underground mines, the abandoned underground mines beneath Centralia, and they were never able to put it out.
Okay, so writing these books, I mean, where do you start with that? You're like, okay, there's a fire that's been going in 1962, but where do you start as an author and an investigator of why it was so intriguing to you to put it into a book form?
Well, I covered it as a reporter for the local newspaper for almost 11 years, 12 years almost. And I was there for the height of the crisis, let's say. And about halfway through that, in about 1980, I decided that this would be an interesting topic for what would then be my first book. And I gathered up all the stories that I could, and then I started doing interviews, with the people in the town, the people who were on the borough council back in 1962 when the fire started, and just kind of pieced the story together like that. I went to the state archives and found documents there. I looked in the borough council minutes in Centralia, which were very enlightening, and what I eventually found was that they had intended to clean up the dump just before Memorial Day in 1962. And they had done this in the past, but not in this location. And so what they did was they sent some guys from the fire company out to set the dump on fire. and that's what they did. And they would let it burn for a while. And then they would just wash it down with water from a tanker truck, go away, everything's fine. Except this time it wasn't.
Wow. And what were the initial conditions and factors that led to the decision to set this fire? I know you said it was like to clean up the dump, but what made them think? Was this like a local volunteer fire department? Because even where I'm from, that's what we have. And so, the expertise of knowing how to set the fire, what's the implications and what could be the cons of starting a fire? What type of fire crew was this, and what was some of the conditions and factors?
Well, it was a volunteer fire company in Centralia, and they were just average guys who I think they made like $5 or $6 a piece for going out on that Sunday afternoon to set this fire, to clean up the dump, and like I said, they had always done this, but until 1962, the town dump was in a different location, and it was in a location where the fire could not spread into the mines. But at the beginning of 1962, they moved it to an abandoned strip mine pit, basically a big hole in the ground that had been used for excavating coal, and they dumped the trash in there. The problem was that there was a hole in the bottom of that pit that they were supposed to close up but didn't, and the fire was able to spread through that hole into the abandoned mines. And in doing this, they violated a state law. There was actually a law passed in 1958 which said, don't set dumps on fire because of this very reason. And so that added another element to this story, that they were worried that they were going to get in trouble after this happened, because of that state law that they had violated. And
as a journalist, and you said in what, 1976 to 76 to 86, is that right?
Yes, that's right. Mm-hmm.
So, as a journalist, what was some of the major challenges when covering this? I couldn't imagine they were freely open to give you anything you wanted, especially when they thought they were going to get in trouble, and to get the word out to the masses.
Well, by the time I came along, the fire had been burning for 14 years.
14 years, right?
And the membership of the town council had changed, but Centralia is a small town. At that time it had maybe 1,400 people, maybe a little bit less than that. And so everybody in the town knew everybody else, and they they were fairly open and guileless, let's say, but they had kept this secret for a long time. And because I think they soon after the fire started, the rumor began that this fire had started because of spontaneous combustion. and that was what was widely believed. When I started covering the fire in 1976, that's what people told me. Oh, it was spontaneous combustion. And it wasn't until I started, delving into this and doing interviews, looking at documents, and I remember it dawned on me one night, like a clap of lightning. No, they set the fire themselves, and that was like the parting of the curtains,
right? And breaking story.
Yeah, and after that, then it became, other things made sense, that I had been told, and so I was able to kind of move forward from that, toward the book.
So you were one of the I'm not necessarily lucky ones that got to go, because a lot of times when I've interviewed people, they do a lot of research what other people have done, but you actually got to go to Centralia and see. And so what were some of your personal observations and experiencing, the witnessing the environmental hazard that happened? What were you noticing? Was there any birth defects of, because, the cold and smoke?
Thankfully not, as far as anybody knows.
Okay.
But you had carbon monoxide gas coming into people's homes. It would make them, drowsy. They would just like fall asleep, in front of the TV when they normally wouldn't do that. They felt ill. they, things like that. Kids with chronic respiratory conditions like asthma were really affected because, I mean, they have trouble pulling in enough air as it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had this bad air with this crap in it, and so they just suffered, some of them. I remember one father telling me that whose daughter had asthma and lived practically right on top of the fire. He said, sometimes it just got so bad, we would just put her in the car and just take her out and drive around aimlessly just to get her out of the house, for, a couple hours.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, one of the big things that happened were the subsidences, where the ground would collapse. And the biggest one, the most important one of those,
like
was
a
on
sinkhole
Valentine's Day of 1981, a sinkhole,
Yeah.
Where a 12-year-old boy, Todd Domboski, dropped into, a very deep hole, saved himself by grabbing onto a tree root, and then his cousin heard him yelling, and reached down into this gushing pillar of steam that was coming out of the hole, and pulled him out and saved his life.
Wow. Well, even where I live here in California, and there is a waste management where they, the landfills that are leaking all this gas from burying all this
methane gas.
And, there's these huge lawsuits now going on towards these waste management. Were there any lawsuits that ever happened? I mean, or is it
short answer is no. It was.
I'm surprised.
The Concerned Citizens Group did have a Washington D.C. law firm helping them out on a pro bono basis, and they looked into it, and they just decided, after studying the law and everything, decided that it was unlikely they would be able to win any damages, from the government over how this fire had been mishandled.
So you have your local, you have your state, you have your federal governments. When did you definitely know your local government got involved very quickly, at least tried. What about state and federal? Did they ever try to stop these fires?
Yes. In the summer of 1962, after the Borough Council realized that, the fire had become established underground and they couldn't do anything about it themselves. In addition to starting the spontaneous combustion rumor, they started appealing to both the state and federal governments, for help in putting out the fire. And the problem was that there wasn't a lot of money for this sort of thing then. It was in a weird period of time when, in the old days, they would have depended on mine owners to come in and put out these fires because their coal was being burned up. But the industry was basically, I mean, it wasn't completely defunct, but it was on its last legs, and there was still some mining going on, but the big companies were not in a position to really step in and do anything.
Well, didn't the U.S. Bureau of Mines kind of try to build a barrier?
Getting ahead a little bit here.
Sorry.
Yeah, during the summer of '62, the Pennsylvania Department of Mines and Mineral Industries and the United States Bureau of Mines, they finally decided that the state could get a project started quicker, and so toward the end of August of 1962, they began a project to dig the fire out of the ground, which failed because it ran out of money.
Wow. I mean, I couldn't imagine it because we seem to have a lot of money going a lot of different directions, and we're very environmental friendly, trying to be environmental friendly in the U.S. at least. In 2024, I mean, that's, that is 62 years ago.
Yeah.
How come the government is not stepping in now to help try to put this out? Because that's still leaking these gases, not just into the local area, but into the atmosphere. So,
well, in 1980, 83, 84, they began a massive relocation project for the people of the town. And it went from, I think something like just over 1,000 people at that time, down to about 5 or 6 today. Everybody else moved away with government assistance. And they were actually told, people who were deciding whether to relocate, well, we're going to come in, we, the state, are going to come in and do this big mine fire project. And your life is going to become a living hell because there's going to be truck traffic, blasting, all that good stuff, fumes, and well, that never happened. And within a couple of years after, the main part of the relocation was done, the state quietly decided that they were just going to let it burn because it was not in a position to, at that point, to threaten another town. There was a minority opinion that thought the fire could move to the adjoining town about 3 miles away of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania.
Wow.
But essentially, they decided just to let it burn. And they have done gas measurement studies at the surface to see how much is coming into the air. And basically, the gases become dilute, in the air,
right,
when they come out. And so they never did anything about it.
Well, can you talk about the closure of the vent pit in 1978, which is, in your opinion, do you feel that this was a critical error?
It was a critical error. That pit had been excavated during the third state project in 1963. Virtually every project ever done in Centralia ran out of money, and this one was no exception.
Right.
But before it was done, the engineer, Gordon Smith, for the state, decided that he was going to try something else. And he excavated a vent pit, to pull the fire away from Centralia, pull the gases away from Centralia. And it worked. Basically, it worked. But Charlie Keebler, the engineer with the U.S. Bureau of Mines, always thought it was a crazy idea, that it was just feeding air to the fire. Now, in between 1963 and 1978, there was a huge Bureau of Mines project where they built this underground fly ash barrier. But that eventually began to fail. And people were complaining. Tony Gaughan and his wife were complaining. And they came back in at the beginning of 1977 to do what they call a borehole project, where they drill holes in the ground to figure out where the fire is and where it isn't. And as part of that, very quietly, Charlie Keebler took some of that money and he closed Gordon Smith's pit from 1963. The effects were disastrous.
I bet.
It's like the fire suddenly turned around and said, "Well, I'm going toward the town," and so that's when the real crisis years of the Centralia Mine Fire began. Was after that pit was closed, and the people of the town knew what had happened. They weren't dumb. I mean, many of them were former miners, and they were complaining. And there was a meeting in the fall of 1978 that I attended as a local news reporter, and Charlie Keebler and his deputy Wilbur Malenka, were there, and people were just getting up and railing at Charlie Keebler. You got to reopen that pit, and at one point Charlie Keebler just looked at him, and he kind of had this Darth Vader voice because he'd had a laryngectomy at some point.
Oh God!
And he kind of said, "You started this fire," and everybody went quiet. I didn't know what it meant at that point, and because I hadn't started doing the research for the book yet. But he knew how the fire really started, and the people in the town did, but it was just this big secret. And so, but anyway, the pit was never reopened. The U.S. Office of Surface Mining, yet another agency that was created in the 1970s, they were always feuding with the Bureau of Mines, and so they decided they would stick it to the Bureau of Mines and do a project to try to relieve the gas pressure on the town. And they drilled these vent pipes. They put vent pipes in the ground like 100 feet down or so. There were like 5 or 6 of them. Yeah, that's the picture of them. And they created great images for several years, just steaming away, and everything, but they had no effect on the fire. The damage was done.
So I don't know if this is the right. I'm going to show this and see if it's right. Is this the map of what the fires are, or is it the wrong map?
No, that is essentially correct. Yeah. The fires all kind of started at the nexus in the middle where Firefront 1 and Firefront 2 meet. That's about where it started. And then one front, Firefront 1, moved west toward the town. Firefront 2 kind of moved around the back of the cemetery and went under Burnsville Road and Route 61 and created the problems with the highway.
Right.
And then the third front moved in an easterly direction and eventually broke out of the ground along Big Mine Run Road. So
what does the future look like? I mean, first of all, how deep is this? And how long do they think this is going to continue? Is it just mostly where the coal is at?
Yes. The fire follows the old mine workings. It doesn't really burn through solid coal so much,
Right.
But there's so many mines. It's just like a labyrinth of abandoned mines in the Centralia. And there's plenty of, coal and burnable rock down there. And so the fire just moves along. Getting air is not a problem. And there's plenty of places that the fire can suck air,
Right.
in down there. And so they just, I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about?
How the depth and how far?
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. The depth. The depth is probably between 50 and 175 feet down. And they and the fire, they estimate, they never really give a good estimate, but I always tell people it'll probably burn like another 200 years. Or so. So a long time.
A long time. And all these people that have been displaced and moved to other areas, did they try to look like one location to build another town, or was it more like, okay, I'm going to offer you a house here and here, or just give them money and they can move wherever they want to?
It's the last. Give them money, move wherever they wanted to. They tended to stay within a 10 to 15 mile radius of Centralia. Many of them moved to the towns of Mount Carmel and Coltmont, which had basically the same ethnic religious mix as Centralia had, and they could stay in their kids' schools. Their doctors were there. Now, people did move elsewhere. There were older people that moved, say, to live with their kids down in Northern Virginia, maybe, or someplace like that, and they just wherever they could find a home to buy. And eventually, within a year or two, the supply of good used homes in the area market, that 10 to 15 mile radius, was becoming exhausted.
I
because
bet.
of all these Centralia people buying homes. So then the government stepped in and did something that was authorized by law, but was not done very often. They gave people enough money to build a new house of the approximate square footage of the one that they were leaving. And so many of them built new houses, including, there was one particular development that was kind of dubbed unofficially New Centralia, where, I don't know, maybe a dozen or 15 or so, Centralia people built homes. And it was, at one time they had grand visions of a new Centralia, but it never came to pass.
And you said there's 4 or 5 people left. Are these like when the hurricane comes, there's all these people leaving? I'm 90 years old and I'm not leaving my house. I lived here all my life.
That's basically it. Yeah. They're all from one extended family, and they are the diehards of the diehards. One of them in particular would look you in the eye and tell you that there was no mine fire under Centralia. And
some big conspiracy theory.
They do what they're kind of into their own thing, you know, and they sued this at one time. The state invoked eminent domain. This is back in about 1992. They invoked eminent domain and tried to move everybody out who was still in Centralia. Well, the residents who were there hired a lawyer, fought back, and reached a settlement, which basically said they could live out their lives there. They could not get the money that was set aside for their homes until they actually agreed to leave.
Wow.
And but a lot of people left after that. A lot of people left because of the new houses they could build. But you had that ever diminishing number of people that just would not go.
So with people still living there, not very many, but it sounds like one family. But can people still go to the area? Can you go hiking in the woods and all this? I mean, yeah,
they you certainly can. There's the only place that's really posted as no trespassing is on the grounds of the Ukrainian Catholic Church there, and but elsewhere, for a time, the highway, which became known as Graffiti Highway because it was covered with graffiti over about a 10-year period, and there were big cracks with steam coming out, in the highway, and the state at one point tried to ban everybody from the highway, and they put up no trespassing signs, and they would arrest these hapless tourists from Iowa, who had come to stop and see Centralia, and get them like a $246 fine. It was nasty, and but that eventually went away, and they the way they did it was the state highway department, which owned the highway, said, we're giving up the highway, it's not ours anymore, we're giving it back to you, the adjoining landowners. And so after that,
let it go.
you can go wherever you want, and people do. And the Graffiti Highway was pretty amazing at one point. I don't know if you have a picture of that, but
what's it called?
Graffiti Highway.
Let me look it up. I'm sure I can find it.
Yeah.
The hit came up as soon as I typed in graffiti. Oh, wow. That is pretty cool, actually.
Yeah,
I have to say. Hold on, let me show. For the people that are listening, you can go to the YouTube channel and look at it. So that actually is really cool.
Yeah, and that's like 1.5 miles of that. Every square inch covered with graffiti. And not much of it is very profound, but it's mostly teenage stuff. And I would go out there from time to time, and there would be kids out there with their cans of spray paint, working on their graffiti, and it was I found it relatively harmless. There were people that got really worked up about it, but I never thought it was a huge bad thing. But I mentioned the adjoining landowners, which was a mining company, and they in April of 2020, during the height of the lockdown, they were upset because people with all this time on their hands were coming to Graffiti Highway, and so one day this fleet of trucks, dump trucks, pulls up, and they cover nearly all of the highway with dirt, with piles of dirt.
Why?
So, yeah, there you have it right there.
Why would they do that?
For liability reasons.
Oh, they don't want. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
So now it's kind of like the lost city of Pompeii. Sometime 100,000 years from now they'll dig down.
They'll be like,
find
oh wow,
weird graffiti and there. But you can still see parts of the graffiti down at the southern end of the highway. I think they ran out of dirt that day, and they didn't have enough to cover the entire highway. But up toward the top, and unfortunately the big hot cracks in the highway were all filled with dirt.
Wow. Well, before we get out of here, I want to ask, every death, every disaster, there's something hopefully good that comes out of it. This Centralia fire, has it influenced any more local awareness or policies that have changed the environmental management?
At least in the coal region of Pennsylvania, it definitely has. Whenever mine fires start all the time. There's probably a new one every year.
Right, right.
But now when the fire starts, the local residents say, we don't want to become another Centralia, and the state will rush in, and do whatever it takes to eliminate the threat. So that is a positive development, because back in 1962, that was definitely not the case.
I bet. And have you got to sit down? I know probably when you wrote the book, you probably talked to some of the families. What are they saying now that they're, many of them, 1,000 people have moved on, but what do they regret not being able to grow old and, passing on their properties there? Or I mean, what, because I'm sure like my family.
There actually is a lot of regret.
Yeah, I bet.
Because it was a very tight-knit community. I mean, people had lived there for 5 generations. Their families had been there for 5 generations, often in the same house. And so, yeah, I mean, everybody knew everybody. There were the usual small town, quarrels and whatnot.
Yeah,
but by and large, they loved their town, and they were not hillbillies by any stretch of the imagination. They sent their kids to college,
Right.
and it was just a good little place. And unfortunately, through this collection of circumstances, it was destroyed.
Well, there's somebody in the chat room says that he lives in, I'm assuming she lives in Mount Carmel. So, so yeah. So thank you for joining us in the chat. But this is really interesting. I always look for new things that people may not know, and I find it so fascinating that we don't hear about this. Did this ever make national news?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it made world news.
I was going to say, but when? But this is not something current.
It was mainly the height of the news coverage was in like between 1981 and 1983,
Okay.
Especially after the Todd Domboski subsidence, the 12-year-old boy. And I remember going up to Centralia one day in the spring of 1981 and running into a TV crew from Brazil.
Oh.
And a reporter from the London Daily Mail. And so it was.
That's pretty cool.
It was quite a story, and
that's pretty cool.
And it continued for a long, long time, in large part because of the internet and YouTube and whatnot. In 2013, I escorted 3 different Russian film crews around Centralia, and and it's a story that resonates. I mean, it's totally weird, but people can relate to it, and it never seems to go away.
Wow. And I'm trying to think what people might want to know going forward. Like I said, this, I feel like with what we are looking at trying to preserve people's quality of life and environment, no matter what you believe, is changing in some ways, but I just feel that this is something important that we need to know about, and hopefully, someday this fire in 200 years will finally burn out. But you can get this book, I'm sure, on your website or on Amazon.
Yes.
And so, what's on your next agenda? Is there another topic that you found out about?
I've been working for a while on a book about an exoneration case in Pennsylvania. A Korean man who was in prison for 25 years for he was convicted of setting a fire to kill his daughter at a church camp in the Poconos, and then he was exonerated. It's a very complex story about mistaken local beliefs about Koreans, about Asian people, and their culture, and it was just horrible.
It sounds like it
happened to him. Yeah. And Han-Tak Lee was his name. And he unfortunately died a couple years ago, but, yeah, I've been working on this book and where I have a literary agent, in California, actually, who's trying to, get me a publisher for it.
Well, if you ever come out here, we'll have to have you in the studio. We can talk about your other book, and
okay.
And please come back anytime. But I appreciate you being on the show and sharing this knowledge. And
I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Of course. And please, everybody, if you like the show, please like, share, and leave amazing comments. You can listen to us on our podcast, Apple, iHeart, Spotify. Just go to Truth Be Told Paranormal. You can find us, and then subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Club Paranormal. And like I said, subscribe, and that way you don't miss any of our shows. You can see me every Friday right here on our channel. Monday, we have Robert Hensley with the Minuteman Report, Bonnie Burkert with the Truth Be Told Transformation, and we have a couple new other shows under the Club Paranormal brand coming in. We also have an upcoming event with my nonprofit called Earthly Beings Foundation on August 2nd. It's called Hot Summer Seance with Patty Negri. And she's going to be on the show soon to talk about it. It's in Santa Clarita, California at the Main Theater in Newhall. And so please come and join us. Get your tickets now. They're selling fast. But until next time, I really appreciate you, and thank you for being in the chat room. And I'm Tony Sweet. And like I say, every week, take care of yourselves and each other. Take care. This has been another episode of Truth Be Told. Thank you so much for watching. Recorded live at UBN Go Studios in Burbank, California. Join us on social media. Facebook, Truth Be Told Radio. Instagram, Truth Be Told Paranormal. Go to Truth Be Told Worldwide for more information on upcoming shows.